It's a much less pleasant day down here today, but what we do know is that if you're up in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon has suddenly got a whiff of freedom, and she's suddenly telling people that they can go out and mingle with each other. Coming up very soon, you can meet 2, 3, maybe even 4 people in the open air. But if you've ever been to Scotland, it's quite often not very nice weather. So let's see what Neil Oliver makes of it all. Neil, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. There's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing.
Very well said. Can only be said by a Scotsman as well. I mean, the number of times I've played golf in the rain in Scotland would be legion. Because if you say in Scotland, I'm not going to play golf if it's raining, you'll never play.
Yes, I suppose I've grown up. I've lived almost all of my life here. And you just accept it. The weather is just what the weather is. But I love it. I do. I love being out I love going walking in the rain. I like going out in the snow.
Yeah.
I like it when it's freezing cold. I like it when it's sunny.
Right.
I find the challenge of it part of.
I mean, there's no question. Yeah,
tapestry.
there's no question that when I was living in Scotland, if the sun came out, it was literally glorious because you were so starved of it that you would just think, "This is fantastic." Didn't matter how cold it was just sunny.
Oh yeah, the legend that is taps off, which is
Exactly.
the cry that goes out, which means everyone take your tops off.
Yes, thank you for explaining that.
Now.
Thanks. So you can turn a bright shade of orange if you haven't already spent in Glasgow anyway all day in the tanning salon. But that would be unfair. Let me start with Piers Morgan first of all, because obviously we are all about opinions here at Talk Radio. We talk an awful lot about things that some people don't go anywhere near. What do you make of it, first of all, and how difficult is it now for anyone to work in television and have certain opinions?
Piers Morgan. I've never had a conversation with Piers, so I can't really speak from any sort of personal experience. But I have disagreed in my head with a great deal of what he's had to say over the last 12 months. However, I would never advocate someone being cancelled or sacked for saying, for voicing honest, heartfelt opinions. Absolutely not. No matter. I mean, in some respects, the more I disagree with someone, the more I would be prepared to say that it's fine that they say that. As I say, I'm sure if I was to sit down with Piers Morgan and certain topics would come up, we might have a right ding dong about it. But that's just the cut and thrust. That's life's that's life's adventure.
Yeah.
Disagreeing with people and having your rough edges knocked off you and having a right go, and then agreeing to sort of shake hands and partner. And the next time you meet, you do it all again.
Yes, and that's why a lot of people have sort of said that what he did yesterday was the wrong thing. But I feel as though, knowing him as I do, that he was obviously at the end of his tether. And I was watching some of his performances from this week last night, and he looked pretty unhappy. He looked as if he was a guy who was being put upon quite a lot by his bosses.
I don't know him personally, but I guess he's someone that is very independently, stubbornly minded. I think he's got that's how he appears. I couldn't say that's what he's like in private life, and he does have. I mean, he's so successful. He's got an absolute genius for being the headline news. I mean, at the moment, in amongst everything, the royal story, COVID, everything else that's going on, to seize the front pages or to make yourself the topic of everyone's conversation. Yeah. I mean, that speaks of a certain genius. For being able to be current and topical. Yeah. But again, the idea of people having to mind what they say or they'll lose their jobs. He says that's freedom of speech is a hill he'd die on. I'd have my own version of saying exactly the same thing. And if he has felt that he had to be elsewhere in order to continue to be himself, then more power to his elbow.
Yes, I mean, I think, again, knowing him as I do, if he was asked to apologise, he clearly had to make some kind of clarification yesterday, which I saw on his Twitter feed and which GMB put out with regards to what he'd said about Meghan Markle and her mental health. And he obviously was asked to do that. And he probably felt that being asked to do something else and maybe apologising to her was a step too far. And I think he's probably right to walk away from that.
Yeah, I didn't, honestly, I didn't see it. I didn't see the full. I didn't see the broadcast where he was talking about the royal story. And I only saw, as everyone did, I think, the clip of the Stramash on here where he stood up and walked away from his desk. Right. That's all I've actually seen. So I'm not commenting from a position of great knowledge of the situation. But again, you have to have a free press. You have to have if you're going to have someone like Piers, I mean, we all have a pretty clear idea about what kind of broadcaster Piers is. And if ITV wanted to have someone like that, well, you take the rough with the smooth. And if there was an editorial team thinking that if at any point they didn't agree with what he was saying, they were going to demand that he say their words and not his own, well, you could predict what would happen. Yes. And it happened.
Yes, exactly right. But what do you find about the workplace now that we are all in? Because you write a column for the Sunday Times, you do television programmes. Do you find yourself having to be kind of self-censorious?
Oh gosh, I mean, I haven't actually made any television. I haven't been invited to make any television for years. I may well have been cancelled.
Well, I keep seeing all these shows popping up on the BBC, and I assume they're new.
Well, I mean, over the years, I think I counted it up once. I think I've made something like 150 hours of telly.
Really? Okay.
Maybe, and if you take in Australia and New Zealand, where I've also made telly, it's probably nudging more towards 200 hours of television. So stuff gets repeated. But more recently, yes, I do a newspaper column and I write books, and I've always had great support and been encouraged to be as opinionated as I like in those media. Obviously, I mean, you know yourself. If you work in a newspaper, the lawyers check things. Yeah, they absolutely do. I mean, every inch of copy, well, broadly speaking, goes under the nose of a lawyer to make sure that there's nothing actionable.
And there's no better training for what I do and for what you do than being trained as a proper journalist, so that you do know where there are lines. You do know that there are things that you can and cannot do legally. Yeah,
I've said to my kids, I did a degree in archaeology years ago, and then subsequently I trained as an apprentice cub reporter. Yeah. I joined in the old style a local paper and did a 3-year indenture, part of which was being sent away to college and night school to learn, shorthand and typing. And then I went to college and did things like Scots law for journalists and newspaper practice. And in many ways, the education that I got there has served me better in the rest of my life than my degree did. Yes. And the fact that, and the experience of working even in a local paper, knocking on doors, ringing people up, cold calling people, and having to be ready to take the consequences of questions that you were asking, and then to write it up into a story and put it out and face the consequences of being sued if you got it wrong. It doesn't have to make you pay attention to how you're thinking and what you're saying.
Right. And I think the advent of the new kind of what I would call celeb reporter is a bad one, because an awful lot of the people that do that kind of stuff don't have that grounding, and they don't know where the rules are, and that's why mistakes get made.
We were laughing about it last week, I think it was, the dressings down that I had over the years from old school editors and the like. My goodness, if you want an education, you quickly get brought up to speed about the realities of what you can get away with and what you can't. Right. I've been in newsrooms for the Sun and the Daily Record, and I've done freelance stuff for other people, and I've worked in a number of local papers. And it's in these, as training for these febrile times where in social media, this person and that person's getting cancelled and checked for everything they say. Yeah. To have any hope of survival at all out there, and there's no cast iron guarantees that you won't put a foot wrong, but I would be very cautious if I hadn't had at least kind of background in writing for publication that I have had.
Yes, exactly right. And so I suppose in that sense you're not having to really worry about what you put in your newspaper column now or what you write in your books. But I mean, if you were invited back to make a TV show, I mean, we saw what happened to Ant Middleton, for example, this week or last week. I wonder whether you would notice it's a lot different.
I'm absolutely sure that I would, because the tendrils of woke thinking have reached everywhere. It's like a building that was once clean stone is now completely ivy clad in wokeism. Yeah. The roots and the tendrils have wrapped themselves around every corner of the building now until it's completely overwhelmed. and I'm sure it would be very different. And it would, what it would do for me is affect the choices that I would make if I was being offered things, because I wouldn't be prepared to do something where words were being put in my mouth in that way.
Right.
I've always worked in situations where it was collegiate, where there was, an outlined script, and you would have conversations with the director, and you would agree a form of words, and the whole thing had to suit everyone. Me that was going to say it, they were going to broadcast it, and whatever, and you had to do it. I thought about that in terms of the royal story. I mean, I don't have a terribly strong opinion about what's going on with Harry and Meghan and Buckingham Palace, but I thought instantly, that the job of being a member of the royal family is so odd. It's a relic from the past, being a royal.
Yeah.
I mean, there's how many opportunities do you get to be a royal on planet Earth now? And it's a relic from a bygone era, and it comes with a really peculiar job requirement. And I for one, not that I was ever anywhere near it, but I wouldn't have taken that job in a month of Sundays or for a pension, because I couldn't have borne it. And I do think if you were someone coming in from the outside and you were contemplating, as it were, being employed by the royal family as a royal, you'd have to have a look at it and think, could I do that? Could I spend my life being like that and appearing in that way? And I would have thought, no. So and then to come in from the outside and be surprised by its strangeness, and seek to change it, I think is a hiding to nothing.
Well, quite.
If you want to be a royal,
this is already the modern version of what was even more bizarre and arcane when Princess Diana joined it.
Why anybody would? Well, honestly, I'm saying this from the heart. Why anybody would contemplate joining that peculiar world is beyond me. It's a way of life that I wouldn't follow. I watch documentaries about the Amish, the Pennsylvania Dutch on television, and I find it all very fascinating, but not in a million years would I marry into that world.
Right.
Not because I would seek to condemn it, just because I'm thinking
it's not for you.
The restrictions on life that would be imposed by joining the world of the Amish would be such that I couldn't do it. So I wouldn't marry an Amish person.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a bit like me going into a monastery where you're not allowed to speak.
You see the job spec. You see the job spec and you think, could I do that? And I think no. So back to your original question, if I was coming up against a proposed TV project, I would only do it if I thought that I could, if I was being trusted to express my own opinions and my own thoughts and my own personality. And if it was made clear to me up front that wasn't going to be possible, then that would affect my decision making.
Yes, I wonder if Piers Morgan is the kind of Mario Balotelli of television. Where they like him because he's got great talent and he's got an amazing ability to get ratings, but then it comes with occasional kind of difficulties that the management have to deal with from time to time. They know that, but they hire him anyway.
I think it's a strange facet of human nature that we want, and our eyes are drawn magpie-like towards shiny things, unusual things, genius. We're all kind of attracted by genius, be it on the football field or be it, a pianist or whatever, or someone in the, a Stephen Hawking. We're attracted by it.
Yeah.
But for some reason, we in addition to there being unique geniuses, we expect unrealistic standards of perfect behaviour from them at the same time. And by its very nature, somebody who has a peculiar genius for something, that peculiarity runs right through them from top to bottom, left to right. And someone like Piers Morgan, again, I don't know, but he's got a kind of genius. He has a kind of genius around journalism and broadcasting. He knows how to make people turn and look at him. And for us all looking on to think that we would all agree with him 100% of the time is very strange. By definition, he is someone who is going to enrage and thrill and leave completely cold and untouched, right across the spectrum of people. And that he said something and then expressed an opinion, and suddenly people are saying, oh, that's it then. He has to be put in a drawer and we'll never look at him again. I find that incomprehensible.
No, I know. It is incredible, particularly given the nature of what it is that he does. Because, you could probably level that at him on any given day. but it's only now that we've got these particular things which are supposedly difficult areas.
I genuinely love opinionated people.
Yeah.
I just
there's
love
nothing
it.
worse than people who say, "Oh, I haven't really got an opinion on that." Well, it's like, why not?
Audacity. I love the audacity and the temerity of people, especially now. You know, the odd person, you know, like Ricky Gervais and whatever. He's
fantastic, isn't he?
He just says what appears to honestly think.
Yes.
And clearly he's created a situation for himself, you know, to do with his financial situation, apart from anything else, that means he's immune to a lot of the hurt that could otherwise be brought to bear.
Well, he's basically, I mean, he said that, hasn't he? I mean, he said in interviews that he can't be cancelled because he doesn't need the money anymore.
But nonetheless, he could still have all the luxury of being of his success and just keep his head down,
yes.
You know, and do whatever other things that he likes doing. But the fact that he continues to put himself out there and say things, and I love being appalled by people. I'm not even going to name who they are, but there are people who have whatever television appearances or they're out there in the public eye, and some of them I look on aghast, but they are part of the, you know, what they used to call the gaiety of the nation.
Yes.
You know, it's all part of what makes life worth living. That analogy of the town centres that we all have now that are all identical because they're all provided with the same street furniture and the same branded names.
Yeah,
there's a joylessness about that. You know, what you want to continue that analogy is to stumble down a lane and find something that you didn't know was there before.
Yes.
Full of strange shops and strange foods and strange accents, and that's what makes life worth living. And to drive those people, those brightly coloured people, into the shadows, never to be seen again. Goodness me, what a sad prospect that is.
It really is. And I mean, it brings us nicely onto the political world, because that's become a very sort of plain and kind of tasteless arena, hasn't it? There's not very many characters left in politics. There's just kind of people who make mistakes because they're stupid, or make mistakes because they're idiots, or make mistakes because they didn't know any better. There's nobody really kind of out there that you would go, do you know, I'd really love to have lunch with that person.
That's an arena that I find increasingly hard to watch. I mean, to me, it's now just sock puppets, you know, who just move and mouth the words of whoever's got their hand up them that week, moving them about, making their lips move. I don't get the sense from anybody that they're speaking from the heart. There's people out there on the fringes, you know, struggling to get a look in, you know, who I think I might be more inclined to listen to, but because they're saying something different, or they seem to be speaking with conviction. But the people that have made a career of it by managing to say a lot and nothing simultaneously, I just find that unbearable.
Well, I think when we spoke last week, it was after Nicola Sturgeon's appearance initially at that committee meeting. But the fact that she sat there for 8 hours and basically said nothing at all pretty much sums up where we are, doesn't it?
Yes, there's an absence of authenticity and conviction. I mean, as I'm sitting here, I try and cast my mind back to the last individual that I mean, looking back, I mean, people are recycling, for example, clips of Tony Benn. Now I can remember. I mean, I was too young for Tony Benn to some extent when he was really in his pomp, and or if it wasn't that, then I wasn't particularly paying attention to things political because I had my mind elsewhere. But I know that at the time I would have thought that I didn't agree with Tony Benn.
Right.
But when I listen to him speak now, I think, oh my goodness, that's a thinker and an orator, and someone who can compose a meaningful sentence. And to deliver it in a way that sounds sincere.
Yes. And
furthermore, what he had to say resonates long after him. You know, it's like stars. You know, we know that the light from stars left billions of years ago, and it's the stars themselves have burnt out before we see the brightness.
Right.
And for some of these figures from the past, it's almost only now that they have burnt out and gone that we actually are bathed in the brightness of the light that they projected at that time. But the things that are the entities that are out there now, I think when they fizzle and pop like 10 penny bangers, you know, nobody will notice that they were ever here, far less that they're gone now.
Well, he was also very principled, wasn't he? Because he could have been a member of the House of Lords, and he just gave it up, which I don't think anyone now would do.
It's not about agreeing. It's not that I've never had a political ideology that I adhere to. It's not that, and there were many stances and things that he said and did that I didn't agree with, but you can see now, looking back, that he was prepared to take a stand, and he was prepared to find a hill to die on. In some respect, and it's not all about Tony Bennett. He's just one of the figures that appears to me out of the past. I mean, people, Ming Campbell. Yeah. I was very impressed with Charles Kennedy. Exuded a certain or a very different kind of charisma. John Smith, the late Labour leader, and some say the greatest prime minister that Britain never had, and all of that. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that or I disagree with it, but it's those stars from the past that we're seeing their light now and understanding what they actually were in their own time. And it basically boils down to the fact that whether you agreed with them or not, they spoke with conviction, and they spoke sincerely, and they spoke from the heart.
Yes. And therefore, I feel that this is not the right time to ask you about John Swinney, who is none of those things, I'm afraid. But he's probably going to get away with. I mean, the SNP are absolutely loving this Meghan and Harry story because they're not on the front pages at all anymore. But I mean, just finally, because we're about out of time, the rumblings that were all going on last week seem to have just gone very quiet. Has it all gone away?
Well, not if you live here, no. I mean, just today, I just found out today that my youngest, when he goes back to school, which is imminent, he's going back for 3 afternoons across a 3-week period. No, 4 afternoons across a 3-week period. Now, I mean, to me, that's just lipstick on a corpse. Yeah. I mean, that's just, there's just no point in that. I appreciate the predicament of the schools. They have to work in the environment that they've been handed, and it's not about the schools. I've got nothing but respect for the teachers, our kids' teachers, but I mean that's just madness. And then the continuation of, well, we'll see what happens with lockdown. But yes, clearly it must come as a great relief to all of the politicians when some other bread and circuses is kicked up that distracts people for long enough for them to put together their next insincere public relations statement.
Indeed. Neil, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Neil Oliver, archaeologist, TV presenter, thinker, philosopher, and many other things, of course, as well.